Okay, so we are about to do a demo of the Windows Azure pack that we installed in a basically proof of concept mode, which is obviously not optimal performance and configurations and so on, but it does actually work. So before starting, we need to access servers by DNS names, so please make sure that inside your etc host file on Linux and Mac, or actually it's a bit different path on Windows, please make sure to have these records, and I will actually share this via email for a copy paste. So we have basically 5 management VMs that we need to maybe access. More specifically, we will probably access only the last one from the browser, but anyway, so at least this one record is needed. Okay, so we are going to log into portal. Uh, what I need to note here, we are using obviously HTTPS, as you can see, but it's all self-signed certificates, so you will get warnings in browser. My browser actually does not display warning because I already accepted in Firefox. You can actually accept the warnings and then later it doesn't ask you, but it will redirect, as you see, to another port, so you might have to actually acknowledge the warnings 2 times, not only once. I have some older user, but let's sign up from scratch as a new user. Let's do it like this. We are not having basically confirmation email, so you can use for this testing, you can use whatever you want, whatever email you want actually. Once you sign up, you will automatically be logged in, and you can start adding your stuff here. We have some introduction explaining how to do stuff, so be my guest if you need, please go through it. I will dismiss the stuff. As you see, the GUI is pretty empty at the beginning, so basically the first thing that we need to do is to create a subscription. Subscription means basically we want to apply for a hosting plan, or let's say a set of services. So we'll say add subscription, and this is what administrator has actually provided. I mistakenly maybe named it DBAS plan, but actually there is no way to rename it. So consider this plan not only as a DB as a service, it also has other possibilities, including infrastructure as a service or VM. So this is something I should rename or actually build from scratch. But anyway, this is a different set of services, so for different customers we can have only, for example, database as a service, for some customers only IIS, for third set of customers all features and so on, for example. We are applying for a subscription, or actually it's a plan. We subscribe to a plan that administrator has created. It will take some time. Okay, I'm not sure if I have paused the video or not. Obviously not. Okay, so the subscription is created. Now we can actually go and create different stuff. For more simple stuff, I will explain first. We can have MySQL database as a service. Let's say we can have Microsoft SQL database as a service, or we can actually go and use IIS stuff, which is basically virtual machines and networks of those virtual machines. So the most simple stuff, I will create, for example, Microsoft database, name demo DB, for example. These are different kind of editions you can offer to your customers. For now it's only one version, so I'm not going to basically make things complicated. Click on next, and then here you need to provide actually username and password that will be basically accessing the database. Once we click apply, here we have successfully created database. You can click on view info here, and then you will basically get username, server. For now, this is obviously local address, or let's say private, whatever. And of course, you can have a connection string if you want to have something already provided for instead of doing it yourself. And that's pretty much it. You can resize the database basically to different number of megabytes and so on, but this is not maybe the best time to do it now. We can change password, obviously, new user, confirm new password, sorry, confirm password, and so on. So there are certain let's say feature set that we can do with Microsoft SQL database, and it's pretty much the same with MySQL database. That's also installed. So as you can see, we can create same information and apply, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so the database is again created. We can view info, and again we have information on how to connect to the database. Obviously for MySQL the default port is 3306, and for Microsoft SQL it's 1443 if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, the connection string is there. The tools usually use the port automatically, and that's pretty much database as a service part of the Windows Azure in its very simplest form. You can create different tiers, you can create different let's say versions like single server or highly available server, or MySQL with lower storage performance, or MySQL cluster on SSDs and so on. So you can really fill this up to actually look nice and provide different tiers of performance and or high availability or so similar. So that's pretty much for the Microsoft and MySQL databases. So let's move on to the IIS part. Okay, so for the IIS part, before I actually create a virtual machine, I will go and probably create a network for my virtual machines. These networks are actually private networks. We are using, on a technical level, we are using Microsoft, let's say, not version, but it's Microsoft driven specification, IETF standard called Network Virtualization GRE. Which is basically very similar or almost identical to the OpenSwitch GRE, for example. So we can go and create a network. Yeah, let me go back briefly. We can do so-called quick create, as you see, only a few options, and create network, and later we can enable NAT and so on, or we can actually use the full, let's say, full-blown wizard, so to speak, with more fields, and let's use this one for now. Are we using IPv4 or IPv6 for internal IP addresses? Let's stick with IPv4. DNS servers, for the start, let's use these ones. Although I need to actually warn you that this is Equinix that we are hosting this demo cloud, and there seems to be some issues with the Google DNS server. When you ping them, you will have packet loss, some percentage of packet loss, so be warned. Yeah. Do we want to enable NAT? Basically this will make sure that VMs will be able from this internal network to go over a dedicated gateway, which I will explain later, to internet, and also this will enable us to do port forwarding, so it's let's say not in a different direction. Do we want to configure site-to-site VPN now? Not now, but we can do it later, although I didn't actually test this feature, but it should be working hopefully. I have no idea what is this IP range here, so I need to research, but I will just leave it as it is, because this wasn't specified by me as cloud administrator anywhere. Let's move on. Here is the proposed internal IP ranges that can be same for all customers. This is something similar to in Cloud Stack to Super CID range. Although this is only one network in Cloud Stack, you can have multiple networks behind single virtual router and routing between those networks via virtual router. But here it seems that there is a possibility to have only one network behind the router. Let's call it virtual router, although it has some officially a different name. Let's stick with defaults, click apply, and we can dismiss completed actions and only have a look at basically only have a look at the ongoing actions. So the network is created. Here it says Hyper-V Net Virtualization PA. This is a name that's basically obtained from what I configure as a cloud administrator, which obviously is not the best option here, but I'm still learning, right? So anyway, we have a network, so now we can actually go and deploy virtual machine. Now, before we actually create virtual machine, I need to explain two stuff. So as I said, I need to explain two stuff. We can create a so-called standalone virtual machine, or we can actually go and use the roles that the cloud administrator or cloud provider actually provided for us as a clients. I will first show the more simple one, which is standalone virtual machine. Again, you have a quick create, let's say, option, but I prefer to. Actually, I'm not sure if we can use from gallery. Let's check. Yeah, obviously we can. Okay, so here it is. We can create VMs from so-called templates. This is basically VM templates. So this is basically VM templates, or we can actually go and create a VM as basically copying the disk. This is VHD disk from that was provided from let's say administrator portal. So this is a bit different than in CloudStack. In CloudStack you just go and basically create a template which is only the disk, but here you actually, the template is not only the disk. When we say template, it's actually a full configuration of the VM, including some features related to networking. So on hypervisor side it's a bit different than CloudStack. This will be the closest to the CloudStack basically, because CloudStack just goes and copies the disk, and this is the disk we can actually use. This is trial versions of Windows stuff. We also have, this is bad naming convention from my side, this is Windows 2008, but let's go to the templates because we need RDP enabled. So basically we have small and medium VM template size. If you click on it, you will see here number of memory, processors, and so on. So let's select one of those. We can give name like VM1. Administrator account will be administrator, and now you can define your own password as a user that you want to provide to that you want actually set inside VM. So this is a bit of contrast to CloudStack, where the CloudStack generates the password and then later you can go and change it, but here you can actually define what you want, and Windows Azure will actually provision this password for the administrator user, similar as root in Linux, right? Optionally, you can define the product key for the Windows so it gets registered or licensed. This is trial, so we don't want to do anything. Do we want to connect this VM to a network? We already created so-called demonet, and yes, we want to connect it, and let's submit the action. The VM is being created. You can see details. So you see this is again asynchronous cooperation. The request is being submitted, and then in the background I can actually show you a bit later. You can check on the virtual machine manager side that this whatever is shown here is actually obtained from the virtual machine manager, which is let's say control center, so to say, for different Hyper-V hosts. It takes some time to create the VM because the disk is being copied over the network. Obviously storage is not the best performing one, but this is just for a proof of concept, so it takes maybe 2 or 3 minutes to create a VM. Now just to show you a progress, I will open a virtual machine manager where actually you can see that the VM is being created. The kit has some percentage. If you go here to jobs, we will see all different steps that this provisioning goes through. This is administrator part, so not user part definitely, but you know, there is copying of files and so on that happens. Some of the stuff is finished, but anyway, we will wait for the VM to finish creating. So the VM is created. Actually it took me almost 5 minutes. It's a bit slow. and I need to check why actually, but anyway, it's working fine. So basically what we can see here, when we go to virtual machines and click on the virtual machine, we can go to the dashboard, see some of the, let's say, we can now see some of the statistics of the VM, like IP addresses, operating system, hardware configuration. Are there any checkpoints? That's actually what was called snapshot previously. Physical IP address of the network card and so on. Here are also IDs of the virtual machine, if you know, if you need to maybe contact administrator and so on. Here also you can see different utilization of processors, memory, or network, basically. So this is updated over some period of time. So yeah. If you go to the configure, you can actually change different virtual machine sizes. This is similar to compute offerings in Cloud Stack, although it's a bit different here in Windows Azure. When we deploy the VM, if you remember, we could choose the small or medium VM. That's just during the deployment cycle. We can basically provide only the minimal size, and then later let the client use virtual machine size as another set of, let's say, size options. It's as I said, it's a bit different from the Cloud Stack, so there's some learning, let's say, so to speak. And checkpoints are basically snapshots of the VM. We can create a checkpoint which is, you know, point in time, and we can revert back if we want to. Now, I'm not going to do this, but anyway, just for explanation purposes, here on the dashboard page, on the dashboard page, we can connect to this VM if we configure static NAT, which I will show briefly. We can pause the VM, which doesn't make any sense, restart, shut down, or forcibly stop. If the VM is actually shut down or stopped, then you can also delete it. You can also attach it to a different network, but right now there is no option to actually, as you see here, the buttons are grayed out, so you need to first shut down the VM, and then you can attach or detach a device, ISO file or or network if it's not connected to network, or you want to connect it to more networks than one, and so on. So basically this is the single VM. Now let me show how to actually enable RDP to this VM, otherwise it's useless, right? So if you go to the networks, we can click on one or more network that we created, and here on the dashboard you will see a list of VMs that are behind this, or let's say inside this network. Here also you will see external IP that's assigned default, at least first IP that's assigned to gateway device. I will explain later how this gateway device works, or let's call it virtual router, although it's not the official name. So if you go to the rules tab, this is where we can actually create a rule, and we can say RDP PF, like port forwarding. Do we want to use existing IP address? We can do this, or we can actually obtain a new IP address if we need to do RDP on two VMs. For example, we obviously cannot use single IP address. Protocol TCP source port is 3389 for RDP. Nice stuff here is you can either define just IP address no matter what VM it actually goes to, or you can, which is actually not possible in Cloud Stack, or you can actually go and choose the VM or the interface of this VM, and the destination port of the VM is what we are going, is the same in this case. So now the port forwarding basically, or NAT or port forwarding rule is getting created, so later we can actually access our VM. So yeah, the rule is created, and you can actually see it here: external IP, source port, private IP, and destination port is port of the VM, and this is actually the port on the public IP. So just for security purpose, we can actually change this rule to 33389, for example, instead of the default one. And obviously we cannot change the rule, which is pity, but yeah, we can delete it and create it again. So this is the rule here. If you go to site-to-site VPNs, we can create a VPN. I have not yet tested this, so I'm not going to show you this stuff. And if you go to the configure button, again, this is network. We can change DNS servers. If we, for example, install domain controller, we can say it has, for example, this IP address, and then all the VMs will actually, via special DHCP, which is actually built in the virtual switch of the Hyper-V, it will provision these DHCP parameters, or actually DNS server and IP addresses automatically to the VMs. So that's you can add additional range and so on, hyper range that can be that the VMs can use actually. So those are a few things that you can. Yeah, okay. So those are a few things that you can do on a network itself. And here this is the place where you configure port forwarding rules. It seems that there is no option to create static NAT. I'm just checking if we can actually use our range. It seems like it's not possible to use a range. I need to research on this, but yeah, it seems it's not possible to use a range, so we cannot use actually static NAT configuration. We can only do a NAT or port forwarding of a specific port. So now let's try to access our VM. We created port forwarding rules, so if we go back to the list of the VMs, we can choose. Here our VM is already selected, but same set of buttons you can get if you go to the VM and then to the dashboard, basically. So you can connect to the VM. The first option is console. This uses some special stuff to actually access the physical console of the VM, same as console proxy in CloudStack, but I have not yet implemented infrastructure on the management part to actually enable this console access because it's a bit tricky. Hopefully I will do this soon. What we can actually do now, we can use remote connection to this VM, which is desktop. Now, although the IP address shown here is 10.0.0.2, which is private IP address of the VM, I can actually not access it directly, obviously, because it's inside the cloud. But although I will say complete and I will open the RDP connection that's being generated, Windows Azure very intelligently actually knows that I did a port forwarding on the public IP address, and if you check this here, it will connect. Actually, it should connect to a public IP address, which it doesn't now, which is strange, but yeah, it should connect actually to the public IP address, so I need to see why this doesn't work for me now. But actually this did actually work with public IP address. Okay, so what I have done in the meantime, because the video recording was paused, I actually shut down the VM and just started again. And now if you go to the connect tab, it will actually, and you go to desktop, which is basically remote desktop connection. Although, as I said, the private IP is shown here. When you confirm the connection and open it, it will actually connect via public IP address. This seems to be working after VM reboot. Small glitch, but yeah, anyway. Let me just check on a different place. Same stuff. Yeah, okay, so yeah, the VM shutdown and start is needed for some strange reason. So let's connect. We actually define username and password we defined during VM creation. So as I said, we will log in with the username and password that we provided during VM creation. Okay, I made a long break, so during video recording, so let me connect again. So yeah, it went to full screen, but here you actually have a Windows desktop of the remote VM. It takes some time obviously to load, but because we log in for the first time. But yeah, here it is, the Windows VM that we just deployed. You can see we have internet access here, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so that works. I will close the remote desktop session now, and I believe that's more or less everything that should be shown here around the let's say operating the VM, so to speak. So we can go to shut down the VM, delete it maybe. And then I will show you about the virtual machine roles, which are basically still VMs, right? But a bit different than the standalone virtual machines. Okay, so I will delete this one. You can see the details of the task and so on. So let's go back. So we have 0. Now we can deploy a VM from the role. Now, closest to the cloud stack is basically, as I said, standalone virtual machines, but with created from the VHD file, which is basically disk image file. So it will just clone the file, and the rest you configure yourself. But if we talk about virtual machine roles, this can actually be like, let's say we need to create a server farm. So same role but multiple instances. Just for let's say demonstration purposes, let's deploy a domain controller, which is, let's say, a basic for any Windows network. So we can deploy domain controller from Windows 2012. And the nice thing here is that actually this is all, by the way, provided by Microsoft, but you can also build your own roles. And you define some inputs to the scripts that will actually run after the VM is provisioned. The hypervisor will actually run some scripts and stuff inside the VM and promote it to the domain controller, or install some software, do the necessary configuration and so on. So this is demo DC domain controller, right? Here it's a bit strange. We have a third set of sizes of VM that's actually tied or defined within this specific role that Microsoft provides. I believe this all can be edited, so it can basically mimic virtual hardware profiles or virtual machine sizes that we provide for the standalone VMs. For now, let's provide a small VM. Again, what disk we want to use. This is actually operating system disk VHD that I provided as a template, and this is basically already installed version of Windows 2012 and just sys prepped, which with some information stripped down and shut down. So we define again some info. We can also define time zone for Windows, and then the hypervisor will actually, as I said, go inside the VM and do the necessary configuration. Now, part of this specific role is we can provide Active Directory settings, so we need to define what is the DNS name for our domain. Let's call it demo.local. NetBIOS domain name is just usually the first part. This is specific to Windows, so it doesn't matter. I'm not going to explain it. Safe mode, again, password if you forget your, if you need to recover from a so-called recovery mode of the Active Directory. Again, I'm setting the same password. If your password doesn't match, you will get a warning, obviously, so it's good stuff. And that's pretty much it. Now, after I submit the action, the VM is going to be deployed from the virtual disk, so the virtual disk is getting cloned, the VM is started, then the hypervisor will actually go inside VM, set the password for the administrator account, and then it will install necessary software, Windows features and so on, and Windows roles to actually promote this server to a domain controller. And what's very nice actually, once this is finished, again I believe it's going to take 5 minutes or more, once you go to this specific role, now you have a bit of different. So as I said, these virtual machine roles are now a bit different than standalone virtual machines, basically because you can scale the number of VMs supposedly very easily. So if you go to the dashboard, still you see the same stuff as for the standalone virtual machines. And if you go to instances, you will see actually a number of instances, or actually every single instance of this role. So this is now a role. This is not actually an instance that we actually see here. This demo DC. It's actually a common name for one or more instances, which we will see as the instance is actually created. Now this will also take a lot of time, actually much more time than the standalone VM, because as I explained, the hypervisor will go inside VM to install additional software components, provision to domain controller, and that actually takes time, which is normal to expect. If you go to the scale tab, besides just changing the different size of the VM, now it's still creating and it will be powered on, so it's not possible. But once you shut down the VM, you can obviously change the size. Here you have a nice slider where you can actually just slide from 1 to 2 instances, and then the cloud will go and provision another domain controller. Although in my testing it doesn't seem to actually promote it, it just installs the necessary software but doesn't configure it, so you still need to go inside and configure this. But again, this is all provided by the role administrator, so to speak, and for this specific role it was Microsoft who provided this stuff. So that's pretty much it, and of course on configure page you can still change some of the stuff, obviously. For the roles, this is the computer name pattern that will be actually created. You will see this later. Network is the only one that we have, and so on. So as I said, this will actually take some time. Now, just for explanation purposes, let's start to create another virtual machine role from gallery, obviously. This is a SharePoint Server 2013 role, which is again provided by Microsoft, although it seems a bit of different name of the publisher, but still it's Microsoft provider. Again, you need to provide a few informations, obviously. During the provision of the role, you need to to select the size of the server. This is, let's say, the preferred size, obviously. Again, blank disk from which the operating system will be created, password, and whatever. And let's continue. Here actually, because this VM role is supposed to be a server that's member of the Active Directory domain, now we need to, this is specific obviously to this role, we need to define, let's say, information about the domain to which we want this VM to join. In our case, we already created a domain with the domain control demo.local. We need to provide administrative credentials of the Active Directory, which actually has the rights to join the server to domain. Again, it's what we used to, what we defined actually in during creating of Active Directory. And of course, these additional options, do we want to do a single server setup or farm server and so on. I have tried to do a single server, which means that my Microsoft SQL Express Edition and so on will be installed, and everything is basically one server, the simplest proof of concept. But if you submit this stuff, it will work partially because this role seems to be broken, or at least there is some errors during the executing the scripts which will actually install necessary software inside the virtual machine. So I'm still troubleshooting this specific role to see how to enable it, because this is one of the stuff client will expect. And again, as I said, this is only 2 roles obviously, but we can have many different roles, which takes time, of course, to import from Microsoft. It has some additional work, but we can provide different roles, and even we can create our own roles, which is a bit more of a magic and art than the science, to be honest, but it's possible to provide your own roles here, and then you can scale the way you need. The VM is still configuring, but just for understanding, I will open a virtual machine manager to see from the hypervisor side. You will see that this okay, we need the demo account, right? Yeah, this is the demo account domain controller. So you can see that actually this VM is running. We can connect via console to this VM, and actually we will see that the VM is running, and there is in the background there is some stuff happening inside the VM. Okay, now you see that it was rebooted probably by the setup itself. I believe I didn't hit the control delete. Yeah, so this is part of the provisioning, obviously, that's going on in the background. It's possible that it will be finished now in a few seconds. Okay, so the VM is booting, and if we go back to the cloud, you will see that it says provisioned. So back to the virtual machine, this is just a role. If we list instances, we have 1 instance running. We can scale this to, let's say, 2 instances. Hit the save button, and then cloud will actually go and provide or provision actually another instance. Another instance in the background. Now, what actually will be provisioned depends on the specific role, which is a very complex set of scripts and everything in background that actually does the provisioning. So that's pretty much it for the compute roles. And as I said, what I actually didn't test so far is site-to-site VPN, and also there is option to basically enable BGP for, I'm not sure what reason, but anyway, yeah. Okay. Anyway, this is a bit of setup that needs a bit of more investigation that I'm not familiar at the moment, since I'm busy with other stuff. And I hope this will be all for a quick demo, and it looks interesting. So just for this is basically the end of the user part. Just for information, I will show you very briefly the administrative basic portal. This is the place where you actually provision all the stuff. So it's similar, but basically a lot of different site. And here is where we provision clouds. It's a logical grouping of resources and everything. Basically, we can provision a gold cloud with a bit of more resources or faster storage, and we can provision silver cloud, for example, with different resources. We can search for the VMs and stuff. The gallery is actually the place where we define VM roles that I just explained, which are actually imported from Microsoft website, and so on. Here we define also groupations of the SQL servers. Obviously, we can define new SQL server that will be served for the customers, define hosting size in gigabyte, and so on. So this is basically shared database hosting, if I am allowed to explain this in a more old-fashioned terms. You can create a group of servers, default group, and some other stuff. So there is a lot of stuff that you can actually create on your own. Same for MySQL servers. There is so-called service bus clouds that's meant for messaging and stuff. Something we are, I guess, not interested at the moment. VM cloud is basically IIS. And also there is so-called website clouds, which is again, let's say, fancy word for some kind of shared hosting, so to speak. In the background, administrator needs to provide a pretty complex infrastructure for hosting different tenants, different websites on a obviously not single server, but let's say a farm of web servers which are connected to database and so on. So here the customer can actually provide his own .NET or even PHP website that's running on Microsoft web servers. Then there is some Git integration and so on. It's pretty nice story. By the way, all this stuff, maybe a bit of more comprehensive and detailed, is something that you can check online if you visit the Microsoft, actually Azure commercial stuff. There is a free trial worth of $200, and then you can actually go and use it for 1 month completely free, and you can actually go around and play with all the different stuff and see some of the possibilities that we definitely have not shown here. And that's pretty much yeah, that's pretty much everything. Here you can see users who are registered on the portal and enrollment date and so on. This is hosting plans, or actually plan that's collection of different services. I define MySQL and SQL Server and virtual machine cloud, which is IaaS, and that's where you can provision different stuff. Well, that's pretty much it for the demonstration. It's a bit too long. I hope you are not bored to tears, but yeah, I hope it will be interesting. Have a good night.